We're talking about long COVID this weekend. 33-year-old Fran Haddock from Sheffield says it's cost her job, affected her relationships and put her life on hold. It was too risky for us to go out and record with Fran, but nicely she has produced this for us.
Hi, my name's Fran and I have long COVID and severe ME CFS, which is myalgic encephalomyelitis or chronic fatigue syndrome. Prior to catching COVID, I actually had mild ME for about 5 years, but I could still work as a veterinary surgeon. I led a fairly busy and fulfilling life, and before I had mild ME, I was a super active person. I was a triathlon runner and training for a marathon. I caught COVID for the first time in November 2022, and since then I've been severely unwell. I've been bedbound and not left my house for a year. I've been relying on my partner and my family to care for me, and I'm not yet recovering. I've just woken up in the last hour. It's 10:30 now. I tend to sleep as long as I can, but it doesn't matter how much I sleep. If I sleep little or a lot, I still wake up utterly exhausted every day. There is a misconception that long COVID and ME is just tiredness, and there is a lot of tiredness, but it's only a fraction of the symptoms. It's not the main thing. Yeah, it takes me a long time to wake up in the morning, and I often can't speak as soon as I wake up. When I'm awake enough, I have to take my morning medication with some food that my partner leaves in a pot for me next to the bed with a flask of tea, and I have to drink a bottle of electrolytes. In the first 6 months, I had severe light intolerance and sound intolerance and screen intolerance, and I had to lay in a dark room 24/7.
What an incredible story we just heard there. That's Fran Haddock from Sheffield, who spent the last year in bed with long COVID. And listening to that is Dr. Alexis Gilbert. He works in public health in West Yorkshire, but like Fran, also has long COVID himself. They are actually part of the same online support group. So, Alexis, you know Fran's story very well. How much of her story is similar to your situation? Can you tell us about how you are right now?
Of course, yeah. Unfortunately, Fran and I share a very similar story. I've also been in bed for the last year. The last time I was in work was December 2022. Dealing with COVID outbreaks. And since then, I went downhill rapidly. In the space of 8 weeks, I went from working on call and busy days parenting to my 2 young boys, climbing mountains. And then 8 weeks later, I was lying in bed, couldn't roll over, couldn't sit up, couldn't feed myself or wash myself, and having to use a commode next to the bed. So it's a very similar story to Fran.
And not that you will get more used to this because it's, a couple of years on or so, but when that initial change first happened, how were you feeling? Because how could you even adjust to being so active to how you are now?
I think, honestly, I didn't realise what was going on to the extent that it was, I kept thinking, I just need to rest a bit more. I'll do a little bit less tomorrow. I'll do a bit less tomorrow. And each time I would do less, it was never enough. Each day feel like I was just failing, and what is wrong with me? I just need to push through this. I need to just try harder to get better. And actually, it wasn't until I found people like Fran in the online community and started doing my own research into long COVID and ME, which is very similar to long COVID as a disease, and realizing that actually pushing through is the worst thing you can do and you have to do as little as possible. And honestly, that made the world of difference to how I was feeling in myself, not necessarily physically, but in terms of my mental health, because at that point I was devastated. I couldn't accept that what was going on. I'd been so healthy and just getting on with life, and now I wasn't able to hug my children or talk to my wife because the sensation of doing that, the sound and the light and the noise, was painful. It was physically painful for me. So honestly, I think I'm still adjusting a year on. You don't get used to it. I have good days and bad days, but even on my best days, like Christmas Day, I managed to rest for weeks ahead of time. And I went downstairs for 20 minutes to do presents with the children. And it was the most heartwarming thing. The sound of my 3-year-old screaming, "Daddy's coming downstairs," because it's about the second time I've managed that in a year. But 20 minutes and I crashed for a week afterwards. I was in the dark and in pain and just not able to do anything else.
I mean, I don't mean to try and provoke you to get upset or anything, but that must absolutely pull your heart out that you're not able to play with your kids the way that you want to.
It really does, yeah. I mean, being a dad, I love my job. It's a brilliant job, but being a dad was always the main thing for me, and it is heartbreaking to me every single day. And I try to focus on the little moments of joy I do get with them, but it does break my heart every single day. And I'm lucky I have a really supportive wife who has taken on basically being a single parent and caring for me as well. It's had a big impact on her life, mental and physical health, and emotionally it's a really difficult thing to deal with, and you have this extra burden that everything takes energy. So thinking takes energy. Doing this interview today takes energy for me, that I have to budget each day. What am I going to spend my very few bits of energy on? And even feeling emotion is one of those. So if I cry, which, I do fairly often, that in itself takes maybe a third of the energy I have for the day if I have a little cry. So you end up having to protect yourself and not feel as much as you want to feel even, which is just crazy when I stop and think about it. It's a really challenging situation. And I think the biggest struggle, knowing that there isn't a clear end to it. This isn't a disease that we understand and we can treat. There's no cure. And until there's more research and more money goes into that and better care, we just have to get on with looking after ourselves.
Thank you. That's Dr. Alexis Gilbert there. He works in public health in West Yorkshire, and like Fran Haddock, who we featured earlier, also has spent the last year in bed with long COVID.
Ellie Colton.